Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning for the celebration of Welcoming Week. My name is Greg Valdivino. I'm the Director of Diversity and Inclusion here at the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce. And this week, as everybody knows, is Welcoming Week. So across the country, there are hundreds and hundreds of celebrations to celebrate the contributions that our immigrants and refugees have all contributed to our country and to our communities. And we are honored to be able to present this presentation from one of the attorneys that is most celebrated here in Kansas City with her work that she's done. So before I get to Jessica, I'd like just to remind that we have a workshop series that we are currently doing. Coming up on Tuesday, September 22nd, is our neurodiversity, superpowers and kryptonite, and working with individuals with developmental disabilities. So we hope that you are able to join us for that. That is at 11:30 on Tuesday afternoon. So now to get to our presenter, Jessica Piedra has 20 years of experience in assisting immigrants in their legal journey towards becoming U.S. citizens. Her advocacy on behalf of immigrant youth has been recognized with the Mexican Consulate's Oatley Award, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce Humanitarian of the Year Award, and Missouri Lawyers Weekly Up and Coming Pro Bono Lawyer of the Year. She speaks fluent Spanish and has been through the immigration process with her own family. So without further ado, here is Attorney Jessica Piedra.
All right, great. It's wonderful to be with you today. I'm going to be sharing the information about DACA and how we can, what it is and how employers can support DACA recipients. And so let me get that presentation up for you. Okay, all of those are great. Okay. Here we go. Okay, well, it's a pleasure to be here with the Chamber of Commerce. I really appreciate their support of the DACA program and of immigrant youth in several panels that they've had over the past few years and in this time of uncertainty. As Greg said, it is Welcoming Week, so I wanted to start with a video from the National Welcoming Week program.
Welcome to New York.
Welcome to Nebraska.
Welcome to Baltimore City.
Welcome to Los Angeles.
Welcome to Durham.
Welcome to Nashville.
Anchorage, Alaska.
St. Paul, Minnesota.
Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Tennessee welcomes immigrants and refugees.
Welcome to Honey Falls, New York.
Welcome to Brooklyn.
You are 100% welcome.
Welcome to Seattle.
Welcome to Ringo, Georgia.
Welcome, immigrants, always.
The United States was formed by immigrants. We're all immigrants, and especially in California, we're all from somewhere else.
The best part of the United States is all these different cultures and faiths coming together.
We believe in chance encounters.
Where I, Jocelyn, an immigrant from Mexico,
and I, Badria, the daughter of an immigrant from Jordan,
can be friends and create opportunities for all.
I believe immigrants and refugees bring diversity to our art and our communities.
I'm Ethan Berkowitz. I'm the mayor of Anchorage, Alaska. We have immigrants and refugees from across the world. They make us a stronger community, a safer community, and a community that's more able to connect to the world at large.
Immigrants and refugees are vital to the success of both our communities and shared future.
I myself are an immigrant from Trinidad and Tobago, so I welcome everybody to our country.
quite simply, we are nothing without you.
Refugees and immigrants make communities more effective, stronger, and absolutely more fun.
We encourage you to stand up for immigrants and refugees in your community.
I challenge my neighbors and local leaders to stand up for inclusiveness.
Join us as we celebrate Welcoming Week.
Host an event, create a dialogue, and most importantly, let everyone know that they are welcome.
Every color, every age, every sex, every religion, everything. We welcome everybody.
We love you. We're here for you. Bring family and joy.
Great, and here in Kansas City, this is our event for Welcoming Week. Great, and so again, I am an immigration attorney. I've been working in immigration law as an assistant, a law student, and a lawyer for about 20 years now. So when I talk about DACA or really any immigration topic, I like to start with some basic concepts just to make sure that we all know what we're talking about. So as we start, it's the easiest to say, well, most of the time is U.S. citizens, right? And so we are familiar with birth in the U.S. as a way to become a U.S. citizen. If you're born abroad to U.S. citizen parents, then you are also automatically a U.S. citizen in most cases. And naturalization, of course, we're seeing an uptick in folks becoming U.S. citizens after obtaining permanent residence. And then there's another kind of more infrequent way, but if parents naturalize, then their minor children also become U.S. citizens by law. So those are ways to become citizens. Let's talk about immigrants, right? Anybody or non-citizens. The most common that we think about are green card holders. The official term is legal permanent residents. We also have a group of asylees, refugees, are folks that come that are not safe in their country, that they're being persecuted for certain reasons and are able to come and ask for safe harbor here in the U.S. There are about 20 different kinds of non-immigrant visas that folks can have, from tourist to student to temporary worker to executives. There's all kinds of non-immigrant statuses that folks can hold. There's another category of temporary statuses, is what we're going to be talking about today, that would include the DACA program, in addition to temporary protected status and some others, other types of deferred action. And then, as we know, we have a very large undocumented population in the United States. It's still around 11 million folks that are have none of those statuses. And those folks may have had a status in the past and lost it and had it expire or taken away, or they may have never had a status and they may get a status in the future. So it's a fluid back and forth with these categories. So let's talk about permanent residence, right? Because that is the safe harbor that you can indefinitely stay in the United States to live and work and have your family and your career. In the United States, the majority of green card holders obtain that status through their family. Our system historically has been based on family reunification. And so that is the largest portion, the red portion here, of the permanent residence every year. The second most popular, though, is employment-based, and that is possible. You know, we've heard a lot about H-1Bs and such in the media, and so employers can sponsor essential workers and workers that they need from abroad to have the best and the brightest. This green section right behind employment is the refugees and asylees are able to obtain permanent residence a year after they've arrived or been granted that asylum status. And so they can move into a more permanent status. We do have that diversity program that's about 5% of the green cards. And then about another little sliver here, this dark blue, are other categories like humanitarian visas and other things. Okay, I think you'll notice that there was no DACA path or no path for dreamers, right? Or just because you came here as a small child and have lived here a long time. There was really no path available to these immigrant youth. There's about 2 million of them in the US that have come as children and have not been able to obtain permanent status. And so the DREAM Act is been the idea of how to fix that and how to address that situation. It's been a long fight. At first, we think of Latinos a lot of the time, but the first really person to come out and push this issue was actually a South Korean pianist in the Chicago area that contacted her Congressman Dick Durbin, and he helped to introduce the DREAM Act in 2001. So almost 20 years now that that's been an idea in the Congress. It has not yet passed. It's gotten close a lot of times. The last time it was introduced as a standalone bill was in 2010. And so again, this bill would offer a new path to permanent residence for immigrant youth that we're going to talk about what qualifications they might have. But after that failure in 2010, the immigrant youth really changed their strategy. Prior to that, they had been lobbying congressmen, and hoping to push it through the Congress. At that point, they sort of lost faith in that strategy and started United We Dream, as pictured here, and they recruited law professors to research the issue if something like DACA would be a possibility. And the answer that 75 law professors found was yes. And then they started taking direct action against President Obama and other congressmen to push this and to approve it. And so DACA was introduced in 2012 as a short-term fix, really. We all thought that we were going to get immigration reform in 2013. That was the Gang of Eight, you might remember, that seems like a lifetime ago, what had a program of earned legalization for those 11 million undocumented folks that we have here, and it included the DREAM Act at that time. Unfortunately, it did not come up for a vote in the House of Representatives, and so it failed, and now we are here. But let's talk about what that program said in 2012, right? That was it was announced on June 15th, 2012, and then started in August of 2012, the program. So DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. To be eligible, the applicant had to have arrived in the US before they turned 16 years old. They had to have been born after June 15th, 1981. That meant they were 30 or less than 30 on the on the date that it was announced. They had to have been in the United States before June 15th, 2007, that they had had 5 years of physical presence before the announcement. They have to be a student, right, in some way. They have to be either have a high school diploma, be currently in a high school or in a GED program, or have a GED, or be in the military. They had to pass a background check and not be convicted of certain crimes. And then they have to pay a filing fee every time, and it's currently $495. And if they meet all of those criteria and they pay the fee, then they get 2 years of deferred action, which is really meaning protection from deportation. You're asking them to defer action on your deportation. And then you get a work permit as well, which unlocks the ability to get a social security number, to work legally, and to get a driver's license. In most states that's required, including in Kansas and Missouri. And so it really unlocks the ability to live their lives more normally in the United States. Okay, great. And so that people ran to apply, right? We had a lot of clinics and things here in the US, or in Kansas City area. And I just want to make sure if you, enrolled a lot of immigrant youth. But like I said, there are about 2 million folks that are eligible, and really only about half ever applied for multiple reasons. So these numbers are from 2017. At that point, we had the change in administration. And so at that point, we had 690,000 folks enrolled. There were about 70,000 that decided not to renew for whatever reason. We can talk about that, or were rejected or denied at that point. And about 40,000 at that point that had become permanent residents through those other pathways, probably mostly through family. We think of DACA as young people, like they have to also be 15 years old to apply. But at this point, they can be 30, almost 40 years old, and so a lot of them are going ahead and getting married and moving through the family-based permanent residency. This is a map of where the DACA applicants live for the most part. So we can see, not surprisingly, that a lot of them are in Kansas and Missouri, or sorry, a lot of them are in California and Texas, New York as the hot spots. But this is numbers as of March 2020. We can see even less folks are in the program. It's 643,000 of the folks that probably are immediately eligible under the 2012 rules is about 1,300,000. To break that out to Kansas and, I wrote it on my slide, how many? Kansas and Missouri. Kansas has more immigrants than Missouri does. We have more agriculture and such there. And so the numbers in Kansas is about 5,000, I believe. Up there it is. Okay, great. Yes, in Kansas right now, we have 5,550 DACA applicants or DACA recipients, with 8,000 being eligible. So there's about 3,000 youth that could apply, but have not. And then in Missouri, we have 3,000 DACA recipients, and about 6,000 would be immediately eligible under the previous rules. Let's see. So we're going to talk about why have they not applied? What's happening? Prior to even the change in administration, there were several people who are, significant amount of folks that didn't apply. One of the reasons that they didn't was the cost. $500 was a lot of money for undocumented families, especially if they had several children. Other folks couldn't get the documents together that they needed to prove that they had been inside the United States. That was onerous and difficult, and continues to be difficult. Other folks were worried about a situation that we're facing today, that at some point it would be canceled and then they would be exposed to enforcement. And so those are the most common reasons that folks did not apply when they had the opportunity to do so. And they had that opportunity up to the time that the program was canceled, or that the current president started to wind down the program. That was in September 2017. We announced the end of the program. At that point, no more first-time applications were accepted. That was the last date that young people were able to apply for the first time. So for almost 3 years, or over 3 years now, young people, if they've turned 15 or they've now finally gotten the money together, they are ineligible to apply. They'll be rejected. That time was pretty crazy. They allowed for some renewals, but it was very chaotic. And then it was over for a couple months until federal judges ordered the government to start accepting renewals again. The idea is that these DACA recipients had relied on the DACA program. They have mortgages, they have jobs, that we can't just arbitrarily stop the program. The applicants argued that the way that it was canceled was incorrect, and we'll see in a minute that the Supreme Court agreed. And so that was unclear, though, for 2 years. We were waiting for the program to wind through the courts. So from 2018 up to June of 2020, we were doing renewals for folks that already had DACA. They were able to continue to renew, continue to pay their $500 every 2 years, continue to live their life in 2-year increments, really, while they're worried about what the court would say about their lives. And so the Supreme Court heard the arguments, declined to hear the arguments in January, and then did hear arguments in the regular way in November of 2019. And so during that time, we were racing to renew the DACA for current applicants. During this time, it was very, very stressful. This is a direct, well, I guess it's a paraphrase, but we can look for articles from January of 2020. During the time we were waiting on the Supreme Court decision, this administration has continued to aggressively pursue DACA recipients in immigration court with the idea that DACA does not prevent you from being ordered deported. The previous administration would pretty much close these cases, but the current administration has continued to aggressively prosecute these immigrants in order to obtain deportation orders, and then in looking forward to the day that the DACA program ends and they can execute those deportation orders. And so that could cause a huge disruption in our communities and in your workforce. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to prepare for that in the future. But this was a very, it has been and it continues to be a very stressful time for DACA recipients. We finally got the Supreme Court decision on June 18th, 2020, and it was really a surprise. Up to that point, we had been scrambling to file as many renewals as possible, expecting that that opportunity would end at the time that the Supreme Court made their decision. But we actually got somewhat of a surprise. The Supreme Court did not decide at all whether the DACA program is legal or not. They focused solely on the way that the decision was handled, of the way that the cancellation of the program was handled. And what Supreme Court Chief Justice Roberts wrote was exactly that we do not decide whether DACA or its rescission are sound policies. The wisdom of those decisions is none of our concern. Here we address only whether the administration complied with the procedural requirements in the law that insist on a reasoned explanation for its action. And so what the Supreme Court really said, well, here, let's get to the next screen on the timeline on that. So the Supreme Court on June 18th, 2020, really says in their decision, reopen the program based on the 2012 rules, based on the original rules, or cancel it properly, is what the Supreme Court said, that the government had to try again to cancel it or reopen it. They did not take action for quite a while, which was surprising, really. The Supreme Court is generally, well, is in the Constitution the highest court in the land, and so we were happy, but tentatively happy, and rather surprised that there really was no action for over a month by the executive branch, by the Trump administration. It continued to delay until they brought another lawsuit, and the District Court of Maryland put down an order saying that they had to comply with the Supreme Court, which was unusual. Usually a lower federal court wouldn't have to enforce a Supreme Court order. So the next step that the Department of Homeland Security took was to issue a memo, which is how the DACA program came about. That's how the Department of Homeland Security often makes rules, is by issuing a memo. And they stated that while they're going to review the program, and while they review it, they're going to make changes to the program. And so many lawsuits are pending, really stating that they don't think that is sufficient to comply with the Supreme Court decision as far as needing to either reopen it or issue a new criteria for why you are canceling it altogether. And so we will see how the battle in the courts and the upcoming elections affect that. But let's look at what did that memo say at this point. So what is the current status of DACA? So the main disappointment really with this is that they clarified that first-time applications will be rejected. And so again, we have close to 3,000 folks in Kansas and then another 3,000 folks in Missouri that could apply for the first time under if the program reopened, so that they could qualify under the current rules and have been waiting to do so. The memo states that previously under the the original rules, DACA recipients could ask for travel permits that are called advance parole to visit their home countries if they had either humanitarian reason or a work or school reason to do so. And so they've restricted that to almost where it's impossible to do so. So that's been unavailable for the last 3 years, and it will continue to be unavailable. That's a big deal for DACA folks, not just to visit their grandparents one last time that they haven't seen in a really long time, but traveling on that advance parole and coming back with a legal entry, if they had come in without a legal entry previously, opens the door to permanent resident status for many of them through family if they have that opportunity. And so that is really an attack on their ability to obtain that, that more permanent status to be able to really put down roots in the United States. Another sort of devastating thing is that the renewals now will be only 1 year at a time. And so they will continue to be paying. So now instead of paying every 2 years, they'll have to pay every year if things don't change. And so they'll still have to be coming up with that. This is actually an error on my slide, so I'm excited actually to report this, that I looked a little closer, and DACA is actually exempt from the fee increase, so that's good news. The filing fee for DACA will remain at $495 instead of increasing. Most other applications are seeing a radical increase in costs on October 2nd. So that's a good, small good news that DACA was exempt from, or is exempt from that fee increase. And again, like I said, there are several lawsuits pending on that because, you know, this is difficult for the immigrants and it's difficult for employers to plan for the future when we're planning in 2-year increments and now we'll be planning in 1-year increments. And so that makes it even more difficult. You know, again, the solution for this would be the Dream and Promise Act. This is the most recent version. Again, the DREAM Act would provide a path to legal permanent residency or green card status to folks that meet those pretty much similar guidelines to what the DACA program was based on the DREAM Act. And so that they had come to the US as youth and that they had some kind of student status. This one would also include TPS holders. That's been also a very precarious group that's been wound down by the president. And so that's another significant portion of the workforce and of our communities that might be in danger of losing their work authorization and being subject to deportation. You know, as you know, I think, well, the election now is only a month away or so, so it's anything's unlikely to pass until after the election, I think, at this point. And then, you know, so for now, we're depending on the courts, which just recently there was this week decision on TPS that the president did have the authority to wind it down. And so TPS is solid through January of 2021 based on the Federal Register. But after that, the fate of TPS is, and that's about, there's several 100,000 folks in that status across the country that will be at risk as well. Okay, got about 20 more minutes. We're gonna refocus and focus on employment issues with DACA, right? And so what should employers be thinking about when they hire a DACA holder or really any immigrant worker? And so there's a lot of benefits to hiring DACA youth. Most of them are bilingual in some other language, most commonly Spanish, and are bicultural and are very, you know, their parents have pushed them to achieve the American dream. But when you're announcing a job and going through the hiring process, there's some really important things to think about. And so an employer, you know, is prohibited from discriminating when you announce a job. So in your job postings, it really, and very, very small amount of jobs where it's okay to specify that you only want U.S. citizens or you know, to specify a certain immigration status. It's almost never okay. And so if you think that you want to do that, then I would definitely get legal counsel because that's something that can get you into trouble putting any kind of restriction. The only thing you can say, and this is throughout, we'll keep the key phrase is, are you work authorized? That's the phrase that you can use. You can't ask, you know, what kind of work authorization they have, or to specify what kind of work authorization they have. So the key phrase for employers is going to be, you know, in your ads or in your speaking to candidates is, are you work authorized? Okay, so you can't discriminate based on immigration status when you're announcing that job, when you're taking applications, when you're performing the interviews, making job offers. You're not allowed to verify an individual's authorization to work until after they are hired. Once you're, you know, if you're hiring, you can't preference your hire on which immigration status they hold. And then also terminating an individual's employment, that cannot be a factor unless their authorization is actually expiring. But if they have a valid authorization, that's not something that you should be taking into account when you are terminating an employee. So let's see how that plays out. Common mistakes that we see with employers are things like this, like you cannot, based on individual citizenship, immigration status, national origin, right? So how does this play out? A lot of times, again, if you ask what kind of visa someone has in the interview process, that's not allowed. If you ask to see the employment authorization documents before the individual accepts the job offer, that's not allowed. Really only at the time that you're filling out the I-9 form is when you can ask for those documents. And then when you do ask for those documents, you need to be careful that you're not asking for specific documents. The safest really way to go is to tell people, look, you know, just to give them the actual list from the I-9 form. And there's 3 columns, as you know, and ask them to bring those documents. I see all the time employers ask, okay, well, bring your driver's license and your social security card. And yes, those are 2 documents that are on the I-9 list. And those are the most common documents that US citizens use. But there's also a whole bunch of other documents that are acceptable, you know, US passports, work cards. There's a lot of different things that you're not, so the safest way, again, is not to, or you can say, bring your identity documents from the I-9 list, you know, as a broad, so that you can't be subject to allegations that you are requiring certain specific documents. You can't refuse to accept a document or refuse to hire an individual because the document will expire in the future. This one comes up a lot for these DACA folks. Their documents are going to expire, you know, 2 years in the future, 1 year in the future now. That is not an acceptable reason to not choose that candidate or to refuse to accept that documentation. We know that it's hard on employers. I'm an employer and I'm trying to look for folks that are going to stick with me, you know, for the long term, but that's not acceptable to base that decision on that information. Also, sometimes in immigration, especially if they lose the document, then sometimes they can use actually even a receipt notice as proof of their immigration status and their work authorization. So you can't refuse an acceptable receipt notice or request specific documents for your E-Verify case. And so that's those are some really common mistakes. I've got some kind of samples to talk about so we can kind of role play a little bit about how that might go. So they, yeah, and so you know that the employers must reject documents that do not reasonably appear to be genuine, but if they do reasonably appear to be genuine, then you need to accept those documents. So let's see how that might play out, not just with DACA, but with any kind of other folks. So let's see here. And just recently, a district court did affirm that that was discrimination and sanctioned major multinational manufacturing corporation for discriminating against actually specifically DACA holders and for having a temporary status. All right, okay, this is it here that and we'll send these materials out to you at the end. So great, so let's how would this play out? So let's, this scenario. So let's say Weilin, Mary, and Armando all have legal work authorization documents. Weilin is a lawful permanent resident from China. She has a green card. Mary and Armando are US citizens, but Armando is a naturalized US citizen and has a US passport. All three workers applied for jobs at Bob's computer technology company. A sign in the company's personnel office said US citizens only. Bob told the workers he had to check their work papers. The workers showed him their papers. Bob hired only Mary, the US-born citizen. He told Armando that he had checked with Department of Homeland Security and he could not verify that he was a US citizen. Bob didn't give Armando any paperwork to show that he had checked his documents. He didn't give Weilin an explanation for why he didn't hire her. Weilin and Armando called the Office of Special Counsel for Immigration related to unfair employment practices, part of the DHS, for help. This office, known as the OSC, is the agency that looks into charges of immigration-related job discrimination. The OSC called Bob, the employer, and after they talked, Bob decided to hire Weilin once OSC explained that he cannot have a US citizen policy only, except under very limited circumstances. Bob also decided to pay Weilin the wages she lost because he had illegally discriminated against her based on citizenship status. OSC also found the company was participating in the DHS Electronic Employment Eligibility Verification Program, known as E-Verify, and that Bob had received a tentative non-confirmation regarding Armando's work authorization. But OSC explained to him that because he was using the E-Verify system, Bob had to post a notice that he was doing so, and he had to post the workers' rights. He also said that he cannot use E-Verify for job applicants, but only after newly hired employees. And then that Bob was required to provide that tentative non-confirmation to his employee so that he can correct any discrepancy. So after they talked, Bob hired Armando. So there you can see how you can get in trouble with some of these common misunderstandings of how employment authorization works in the United States. And so this has been one of my favorite, when I talk to young people, they like to shop at Forever 21, right? And I think they're going out of business now, but they also were sanctioned and had to pay back wages to a DACA recipient at the beginning of the program in early around 2014 because they didn't understand what it was and they refused to hire a teen with a DACA work permit. And so don't make that mistake and have to have legal fees and pay back wages. Okay, in these crazy times, in these kind of uncertain times, let's talk about how you can support your DACA employees in this time. Oh, my numbering got off, that's okay. One, you can help them, you can pay for their renewal fees. If you know this, because this is coming up, you can offer to pay that. It's $495 just for the filing fee, but then often there's additional fees of if they're using a lawyer or they could use your lawyer. That would be a great way to support your team member. I also have had employers help pay for the legal fees as they move forward into permanent residency. And so they're not necessarily getting their permanent residency through employment, but they are becoming more stable. And so that's good for their employer. And so their employer wants to help them through that process. Another thing you can do is to highlight your company's support for DACA through your social media, through through emails to your staff, through your participation in the chamber. I greatly appreciate their legislative priorities have included support for DACA and support for the DREAM Act in the last several years. And so those are all ways that you can highlight your company's support for this group. You can also support local organizations and nonprofits that are hosting DACA Renewal workshops. With COVID, we've had to do them remotely, so it's been even more difficult. And so we would really appreciate the help and the support with that. If you have relationships with large law firms, we are working on preparing for the worst case scenario. Hopefully that will not happen, but if DACA is completely eliminated, then there will be several thousand youth in our community and almost 1 million youth nationally that will need help to move forward in their life. And so that's something that you can help with as well. Finally, you can join I'm gonna play this video from the I Stand With Immigrants. Is it gonna go? Oh, there, it's going. Great. Oh.
Hey, Jess.
Oh, sorry, it got paused. Okay.
It's not playing. Did you make sure to click the share computer sound at the bottom?
Okay, yes, thank you. It's it worked earlier. Oh, it's this one. Sorry, this is it. Here we go. I clicked the wrong button. I didn't get till now. Is it going now or no? I think it's not. It says it's paused.
Yeah, it might be trying to load.
Okay, resume share. Let's try that. Sorry about that. Let's try again.
United States of ours.
Is that working?
That we love and we care for.
Yes. Okay, let me start over.
So important to American lives because we come to bring our full selves in these United States of ours that we love and we care for, we cherish. And I look around me and I only see 3 very distinct groups of people in America. I see the Native Americans, I see the descendants of slaves who were born here against their wills, and I see immigrants. So if you really look into yourselves as an American citizen, you have to fall into one of those 3 groups. So if we didn't look at us out of many one as immigrant, then this is not even a question that needs to be asked, because we can just look at ourselves as a people, as a nation, and answer that, because we make this country what it is. That is why, as an immigrant, I find myself privileged to be able to work with other immigrants, with other communities, to be able to fulfill that dream that out of many, we are one.
I stand with immigrants.
I am Francia Raiza, and I stand with immigrants.
I'm Bamba John Bamba, and I am an immigrant.
I'm Andy Allo, and I stand with immigrants.
I'm Karim Barar, and I'm a proud son of immigrants.
Yo soy Eugenio Derbez, y yo soy un inmigrante.
I am Isabella Gomez, and I'm an immigrant.
I'm Charles Melton, and I stand with immigrants.
Hola, soy Arturo Castro, y soy un inmigrante.
My name is Elle, and I stand with immigrants.
اسمي ميثاء الحسن وأنا مع اللاجئين.
I am Denise Bideau, and I stand with immigrants.
My name is Brenda Song, and I stand with immigrants.
I'm Liza de Oliveira, and I stand with immigrants.
I am Yusuf Salah Arakat, and I stand with immigrants.
I am Jenna Ortega, and I stand with immigrants.
At Immigrante ako.
I'm one immigrant.
Y soy un inmigrante.
Ako inmigrante.
Y yo soy inmigrante.
I stand with immigrants.
I am an immigrant.
And I am an immigrant.
I am an immigrant.
And I am an immigrant.
Non mwen se Gerline Joseph et mwen se yon immigrant.
All right. Well, thank you for having me today. I think we can move on to the questions and answers. So hopefully folks have some good questions for us. Great. So I will stop my share. And
thank you, Jessica. That was wonderful. We do have some questions from the audience. So the first question is, what is the best way to go about finding out that your employee would need assistance with funding for the renewal process without violating the previous mentioned pitfalls?
Sure. So you would have, as their employer, access to their expiration dates on the I-9s. And so that would be appropriate for HR to be, and actually required by the law for HR to be keeping tabs on that, on when their documents expire and what kinds of documents they have. And so if you're seeing that I mean, I think you could do two things. You know, like when I work with schools, I usually ask them to put something out so people can self-identify, you know, and so that would be less intrusive and less, you know, so that you could put out a statement to the entire company saying, you know, we understand that this is a hard time and we want to help. That would be one way to go. The other way, I think you could, you know, pull these folks into a meeting and say, hey, you know, we understand this is going on and we want to support you. You know, have you renewed yet, or do you need some assistance with that? I mean, you know, so you could go either way, more, you know, more discreet or more of a blanket offer. I think depending on your firm's culture, you know, you might get other folks being like, well, you're not paying my legal fees, I guess, if you put it out to everyone. Now that I think about it, I've now got 9 employees, so that's a different game than just my 2, and then some of you that have hundreds of folks. But so I think you could either put it out as a call, you know, that we're supporting and we want to, you know, please come and talk to us about how we can support you, maybe as a you know, DACA recipient, or you should have that information, you know, in the I-9 files that of what kind of documents each employee has and when they expire.
Now, just a quick follow-up. It is more common now for DACA recipients. Most of them don't try to hide that they're DACA, right? I mean, it's almost like a badge of honor that, hey, I'm a DACA recipient. So a lot of them are going to not make it too big of a secret.
True. I mean, yes, that's definitely been true. I think that's going to shift again, though, because as it becomes more and more uncertain, because, you know, they're not going to necessarily want to bring that to the attention of their employer and other things if their cards might expire and they might not be able to renew in the future. So that's, you know, I think we might see a retreat from that, unfortunately, if folks are feeling more nervous about their status, and especially if the company hasn't made a statement that they support immigrants in general, you know, and DACA, because, you know, as everyone knows, the climate has gotten very polarized and people have very strong feelings, usually one way or the other. And so it's gotten more dangerous in the last couple years to be out, whether it's reprisals from your employer, or even we've seen, unfortunately, hate crimes, even here in Kansas City against, you know, Latinos. There's exponentially up in the last several years. So
very good. Another question is, if given the delay in timing, DACA has been expanded to those after 2007, and if this is just a point of time in legislation, or if it can be a currently rolling application, example, constantly expanding timelines for eligibility and enrolling new individuals.
Well, so since 2017, the Trump administration has refused to receive new applications. And so even if folks comply with those original qualifications, like they were here before 2007, you know, and they comply with all of the requirements and can pay the fee, they still cannot apply right now. Unfortunately, even some of the folks, you know, it's getting harder to prove that you've been here since 2007. That's 13 years now. And so when in the small window, we thought we could do some applications, that month delay, you know, we tried to help, and there were, you know, some folks that were infants during that time, and there just wasn't any proof that they were inside the United States. And so it's getting more difficult. Hopefully in the future, they'll move up the date. Really with any kind of reform proposal, that there's usually like a 5-year look back that you've been inside the United States, you know, you've put down some roots. And so I would imagine if there's a reform next year, it would be back to 2015 or something like that would be the look back.
Good. And I know you touched a little bit about on this in one of your slides, but what can businesses do to make immigrants and refugee workers feel more comfortable or more welcome in our community?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can be creative, and that Welcome Week is really a great place for ideas. And so I think you can be as creative, you know, maybe have multilingual signs, and, you know, there's those inspirational posters. You can try and make sure you've got some multicultural things, you know, in your office that you support that. I know you know, have all kinds of ideas for diversity efforts, you know, just in general, I think are really helpful. Again, you know, it's great to put out a statement. A lot of people put out statements, you know, about Black Lives Matter and things like that. And so, you know, now it's Hispanic Heritage Month, so it would be a good time. Not all DACA recipients are Hispanic, but a good 3/4 of them are. So it is an overlap. And to just, you know, state that you know, what it means to your company. On a personal level and on an economic level, I think hits people, you know, that this is a real thing. If we really did pull, you know, 700,000 workers out of the economy, what that would look like for the United States. That's what it would mean if we canceled this program. It would mean individual lives devastated, and, you know, and a lot of them have U.S. citizen children, and it would be that ripple effect. But it also would have a huge effect on our economy. And so I think putting out statements, putting out, you know, letters to the editor and things like that to try to sway public opinion about how this isn't, you know, some abstract issue that doesn't affect you, even if you don't know any immigrants, that it will affect all of us if we do manage to run all the immigrants out of town.
Yeah, and I wanted to add that for the past 2 years, the Chamber has been working with the Reach Healthcare Foundation and Immigrants and Citizens Concerned for Immigrants and Refugees to put together a welcoming plan that we will unveil on December 4th. So we will launch this plan. It talks about what we can do to make our immigrant population and refugees, or our new neighbors basically, feel welcome in Kansas City. So look for that. What inspired you, this is sort of a personal, what inspired you to personally to start doing this work?
Yeah, I always give credit to my mom. There you go. I don't know if she's watching or will catch the replay, but she encouraged me. Well, she took me to protest for the Equal Rights Amendment as a little girl, right? So I've had the activist in my blood, and then encouraged me to learn Spanish as in high school. And so I started studying Spanish, and then I had the opportunity really to help with the first kind of wave of immigrants into the Johnson County area in 1993. I was in high school, and she was an elementary school teacher in one of the schools where a lot of the families showed up with really no infrastructure. No one spoke Spanish. I mean, I did things like translate the lunch menu so the kids knew, you know, what to eat, and in my spare time. And we ended up starting what's now the really fantastic Johnson County English as a Second Language program in the basement of Grace United Methodist Church around that time. And so I just really, and then I just have stuck with it my whole life. I guess this population has been my heart, and I've enjoyed it. And I, you know, when I found out I could run a business doing what I love, you know, then it's just really a joy and every day.
Good. And since 2015 in Missouri, a state bill has barred publicly funded universities in the state from offering in-state tuition to students living in the country illegally, including DACA students. Has there been any movement to change this recently?
It's tough. They got close last session, actually, to get that language out. This is, you know, kind of personal for me because in 2012, we were super excited about DACA and about getting the work permits. And then we started brainstorming, like, what else does this mean? Like, what can we do for these kids, you know, that have been really trying hard. And I realized, you know, we'd been working against this 2008 bill that prohibited undocumented students from attending school in Missouri. That was an anti-immigrant wave. And we've been working on that, and we realized, oh my goodness, DACA students fit right into one of the exceptions to that terrible rule. So I worked with I sit on the Hispanic Advisory Board at UMKC since I'm an alum from there. And, you know, we had explained it to them, and all the universities across the state actually agreed to enroll DACA students for the first time since 2008, and they charge them, for the most part, in-state tuition. They charge them their metro rate tuition, you know, in UMKC and St. Louis and some of the other kind of border schools. I think MU never charged in-state tuition because they were in the middle and they don't have the programs. Yeah, and then the legislature heard about it and reversed it. So this is again where if we could get some more heavy hitters, you know, like some big companies to complain about this, about, you know, wanting tell their legislators that they want immigrants, you know, in our communities, because unfortunately a lot of our Missouri legislators will be very honest about their intentions with these kinds of bills, that they want the immigrants to leave. That's what they'll say. I mean, they're not subtle about it. And so we need to tell them, you know, that's not what, you know, what our economic powerhouse companies want, you know, and then that's not what our we want as Missouri citizens, to make it difficult for these folks. There was, you know, and so we're continuing to fight back on that. I think really we're going to need a federal solution, is what I've kind of switched my own efforts onto. You know, but we should be pushing at all levels, right? With this welcoming plan for our city, and then, you know, we should be working with the state legislature for them to understand that immigrants are good for our economy and good for our states, and then with our national representatives as well, to, you know, for them to be hearing our voices, saying that we want policies that will foster and incorporate immigrants into our institutions, rather than pushing them into the shadows or pushing them to other states where they can take their, you know, small businesses and their economic activity elsewhere.
And one last question for me, Jessica. What type of degrees are DACA students getting? I think a lot of the times our companies are asking, well, what are their skill sets? What is the biggest major that our students are majoring in, or where do they fit best?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's everything. They're, you know, it's like immigrants want the same things that everyone else wants. You know, I mean, I think immigrants historically are pushed into maybe, you know, certain careers where there's a more certain paycheck, right? I mean, they're immigrant parents probably are, you know, not wanting them to necessarily major in poetry or something, but I have met quite a few immigrants though that have graduated from the Art Institute. Has been a really great partner in helping undocumented students reach their dreams. But I think it's all over the place. You know, they're getting college degrees. They're really probably almost more likely to go into trade schools. You know, we have a great, we're really running out of folks to do technical careers. And so that's something that, you know, I talk to a lot of my clients want to do, you know, automotive tech and that kind of thing, up to, you know, I helped a girl or a young woman get into a PhD program at Notre Dame. And that's one of the most, you know, proud things, that right when the DACA program started, she had been recruited to attend. And then she got there and they were like, what is this? You know, again, back to our discrimination, like they didn't understand, you know, most Americans think you're a citizen, a green card holder, or you're undocumented. They don't understand that there's a ton of other documents that people can have. And so they were going to tell her she couldn't come to this program, and they wouldn't talk to her. And so this is why I became a lawyer. Back to that other question, really, is that they found me at a community event. She wasn't even my client. And I made a call to the university as an attorney, and they answered the phone, right? And they were like, we were happy to talk to you, ma'am, right? Is when you call as an attorney. And, you know, and I was able to explain to them what the DACA program was, that she is work authorized because she has to teach classes, you know, as a PhD student. And then she was able to move forward with her program. And, you know, so that's one of the most proud things, I think, you know, that I do, just as my 5-minute phone call can change someone's life. But yeah, I don't think there's really any, you know, another sticky thing in Missouri is that they're not allowing DACA holders to have professional licenses. There is a restriction in the federal law from the 1996 laws that were, you know, very negative for immigrants, and they count professional licenses as a public benefit similar to welfare. I don't, anyway. And so I have represented several nurses trying to overturn that in Missouri at the nursing board, and we've so far been unsuccessful. So if they, you know, unfortunately these poor, you know, I just feel bad for these young people that have invested their own money, paid 100%, you know, they're not eligible for financial aid to get a nursing degree, and they're not able to get their actual license until we really change the law. So we're losing out on these really talented healthcare workers that are not. So that's another thing that the state legislature could change. They would have to pass a bill to say that you know, they could still restrict it to lawful status or lawful presence if they wanted to, but they could expand it so that DACA holders and other temporary statuses could get professional licenses.
Very good. Well, we want to thank you for all that great information, and we're going to follow up with our audience by sending them your information as well as a couple of documents. So thank you so much. That's been wonderful, and it's a great ending to our Welcoming Week. Thank you, Jessica.
All right, thank you.
Even though Welcoming Week ends on Sunday, that doesn't mean that you can't continue to be a welcomer to immigrants and refugees. That is why the Chamber is working hard to build this welcoming plan. And we will launch it, as I mentioned earlier, that we will launch on December 4th. We will make a big campaign and promotion campaign around it. So we encourage you to tune in and join us. If you represent an organization that serves directly, provides services to our immigrants and refugees, please give me a call. And we'd love to add you to our steering committee so that you have a voice in what that plan looks like. So on behalf of the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, thank you so much, and we hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thanks.